My last memory was the sensation of my own bones screaming. I was being crushed, not by a machine, but by my own twin sister's smile. Leora had used her density system to compress me into a 4-inch cube of organic matter, a bio-battery to power her bunker's life support. "Kael," she had whispered, her eyes cold as diamonds. "In this new world, those who don't produce value are just wasted volume. Thank you for being my shield all these years, but a shield is useless when the war is over." Then, the void. But I woke up. I lunged forward, gasping for air that didn't feel like liquid lead. I was in my old room. The clock read March 14th, 2050, 7 days before the solar silence, the day the sun would blink out and gravity would become a shattered mirror. Floating in the air before me were two familiar icons, the red, vector system, and the gold, density system. The door burst open. Leora stood there, her face flushed with a manic hunger I recognized instantly. She had been reborn too. In our past life, I had snatched the red icon to become her protector, believing her frail health required my strength. This time, before I could even blink, she lunged for the red icon. "It's mine, Kael. In this life, I am the hero. I am the force that moves the world," she shrieked, her laughter echoing with the ghost of the sister I once loved. I didn't move. I simply reached out and touched the golden icon. System binding successful. Density system. Initial perk unlocked. Molecular refinement. Current storage capacity, 1,000 tons. Leora looked at me with pure contempt. "You're still a fool, Kael. You chose the glorified backpack? Good luck being my pack mule while I tear the shadow echoes apart with my bare hands." She stormed out to spend our inheritance on designer clothes and weapons, thinking raw force would save her. She didn't realize that the vector system feeds on metabolic heat. In a world without a sun, every punch she threw would turn her own blood into slush. I had exactly 168 hours. While Leora was busy posing for her apocalypse readiness social media posts, I liquidated every asset we had. I sold our family's company shares and the mansion for $20 million. But I didn't go to a grocery store. I went to the city's largest industrial waste sites and junkyards. "I want everything," I told a confused junkyard owner. "The scrap metal, the corroded copper cables, the old lead-acid batteries, even the toxic sludge in those barrels." They thought I was a madman. I paid them cash to haul the trash to an abandoned deep earth salt mine I had leased. It was 2 miles underground, naturally insulated, and shielded from the surface gravity fluxes. Once the mine was filled with thousands of tons of waste, I activated the heart of my system. 500 tons of rusted scrap and industrial sludge. Output, 5 tons of grade S tungsten steel alloy and 50,000 gallons of purified biofuel. This was my trump card. The density system wasn't just a warehouse, it was a cosmic scale factory. I wasn't just storing items, I was stripping them down to their molecular perfection. I bought 1 million gallons of dirty river water and refined it into heavy water for cooling systems. I bought cheap, expired seeds and refined their DNA into hypergrowth strains that could thrive in total darkness. March 21st, 12 p.m. The sun didn't set. It simply ceased to exist. The sky turned a bruised purple before plunging into an absolute, suffocating black. Then came the solar silence. The ground began to vibrate. Gravity became a chaotic beast. Outside, people were suddenly launched into the air as gravity flipped, only to be slammed back down with 10 times their body weight seconds later. The sounds of metal twisting and bone snapping filled the air. And then they appeared, the shadow echoes. Beings of dark matter with glowing red eyes, invisible in the dark and hungry for heat. Leora and I were in the living room. "My time!" she yelled. She thrust her hand forward, a shockwave of vector force blasting a shadow echo through a wall, but she immediately gasped, her arm turning a pale, ghostly blue. Her body temperature had dropped to 34 degrees Celsius in a single second. "Kael, pack the food! We're heading to the government shelter," she barked. I looked at her, my expression a blank slate. "Who is we? Don't be a brat, move!" I picked up my backpack, which weighed nothing despite containing a refined survival kit. "Leora, in my last life, you turned me into a cube to save space. In this life, I only have space for things of value. And you are a liability." I walked out the door and into the darkness. "You'll crawl back to me! You have no weapons! You'll freeze!" she screamed, her voice cracking as she began to shiver uncontrollably. I didn't tell her that in my hand, I held a refined obsidian density blade, a sword so dense it could cut through a tank, but through my system, it felt lighter than a feather. I arrived at my salt mine fortress. Inside, the refined biofuel powered massive generators, bathing the caverns in warm, artificial light. I had hydroponic gardens growing nutrient-dense crops and a water filtration system that would last a century. But survival wasn't enough. I needed cores, the shadow echoes left behind gravity shards when killed, the only material that could level up my system. I hunted every night. The shadow echoes were fast, but within 5 meters of me, I activated my density field. I increased the air density around them until it felt like they were swimming in liquid lead. While they struggled to move, I would step forward and take their heads with a single effortless sweep of my blade. Level 10 reached. New skill unlocked. Event Horizon. Ability. Create a localized gravity well that crushes any object within a 10-meter radius to the size of a marble. News from the surface reached me through my refined satellite array. The government shelters were hellholes. No heat, no light, and thousands of people packed into freezing bunkers. Leora had become a warlord of a small gang, using her power to steal food, but her body was failing. She had lost 3 fingers to frostbite. She was a fading star in an endless night. 1 month into the darkness, a massive convoy appeared at the mouth of my mine. Tanks, armored trucks, and hundreds of starving soldiers. At the front, Leora sat on a throne of scrap metal, wrapped in layers of filthy furs, her face gaunt and pale. "Kael!" her voice boomed through a megaphone. "We know you have a paradise down there. The government has authorized the seizure of this facility. Open the gates, and I might let you live as our servant." I appeared on the external holographic display. "Leora, you led an army here just to find a grave? Fire!" the commander ordered. They launched missiles, but as the projectiles entered my territory, I manipulated their density. In a heartbeat, I made each missile weigh 10,000 tons. They dropped out of the sky like stones, exploding directly in front of their own convoy. "My turn," I whispered. I didn't use a sword, I used the earth. I activated Event Horizon beneath their lead tanks. The ground simply swallowed them. The tanks were crumpled like aluminum foil, and the screams of the soldiers were silenced as the gravity well pulled them into a singular point of crushing pressure. Leora tried to fly away using her vector force, but her body was too weak. The metabolic cost was too high. She plummeted from the sky and landed in the freezing mud, her legs shattered. I walked out of the mine's blast doors. Each of my footsteps left a crater in the frozen ground, not because I was heavy, but because I chose to be. I reached Leora. She was a mess of blood and mud, her heroic red system flickering like a dying candle. "Kael, please, we're blood. Remember when we were kids?" I looked down at her. "I remember you turning me into a cube. I remember the coldness of your heart being far more absolute than this apocalypse." "I don't know what you're talking about. You're insane," she cried, desperate to maintain her lie. I pulled a small, shimmering black stone from my pocket, refined carbon. "You wanted space, Leora. You wanted to be the center of everything. Let me help you with that." I placed my hand over her. Absolute compression activated. The screams of the Queen of Vectors were cut short as the air around her began to fold. Her body didn't die. It was simply compressed. Her mass stayed the same, but her volume was reduced until she was nothing more than a small, glowing red marble. I picked up the marble. "Now, you won't take up anyone else's space." I returned to my fortress. The solar silence would last for generations, but I was not afraid. I had the resources of a planet, the technology of a god, and most importantly, I was no longer a shield for a sister who didn't exist. I sat on my throne, sipped a cup of refined coffee, and watched the monitors. Outside, the world was a graveyard of shadow and ice. But here, I was the law. I was the gravity that held the world together. I am Kael, the Density King, and this is my eternity. Hope you guys love this one. I'm featuring subscribers in my upcoming videos. Just comment your name below to be included. Subscribe for more and share this with your friends.